Our guest today is a visionary leader, Paul Tsolo. He is the CEO and founder of Pure Leadership Institute. He started from small beginnings at Transnet to being recognized as the 2024 United People Global Sustainability Leader. Paul has dedicated his career to empowering individuals in AI, innovation, and ethical leadership. Now, his institute, accredited by the Services SETA, has trained over 14,000 students and professionals, including partnering with the likes of McKinsey and Co. Now, if you or your organization are ready for the next level leader, you can contact him on www.pureleadershipinstitute.com. I hope he can help you transform that potential into impact. Let's enjoy.
I'm good. How are you?
Hey, my brother, I'm good. How are you?
Good. So, thanks for sitting down.
Thank
Us
you.
today.
For having
Welcome.
me.
How are you checking in?
Yeah.
Hectic.
It's been a hectic week, a hectic
Okay.
month, a hectic year, a hectic life. I think we've been a bit hectic this week because I had to just juggle a few things, manage a number of things, both business and personal. So I think, like I did indicate, never traveled to the Northern Cape last 2 days, and that was just a very hectic journey because in and out.
Yes.
But yeah, it was good. So today we celebrated my mother's birthday, so I'm in that jovial space. So after this, we're going to be going out and celebrating her. So yeah, I think I'm just in a good space in that sense.
Hopefully it becomes a beautiful celebration.
Yeah, we anticipate it to be.
Yeah, and thank you really for honoring us by coming today. I mean, that would have been a perfect excuse to say, no, guys, not today.
Look, and we never miss purpose. So this is part of my work because you are extending my voice, giving me
Exactly.
amplification. So definitely, I wouldn't leave this for a lot of things. So yeah,
No,
I'm happy. I'm happy.
We appreciate that. Just a background about yourself. I mean, who is Paul? What makes this person like you see today? Where are you from? How was your upbringing, etc. Anything that you want to share about that background?
Okay, so many difficult questions. When there's a program that we do, which I ask participants that question, who are you? And it's such a profound question, right? When you are asking it, but when then the tables are turned and you ask, yeah, that's not an easy question. I think how I think about myself. So I think, as you indicated in your introduction, my name is Paul Tsolo. And how I think about the question, who are you? And I've thought about this quite deeply, right? At the core, my brother, I think I'm a teacher.
Okay.
At the core. So I think that's the best characterization of who I am. I think also when I'm gone, I would like to be remembered in that way.
Someone who taught.
Yeah, someone who put out a lot of effort to just making sure that they can teach the current and next generation. And if I do my job well, it means that, that Ecclesiastes, right? Chapter 12. It says that because the teacher was wise, he basically put out and put together and sought to just put together all of the thoughts, right? And that's literally what we get in both the book of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and Song of Songs, if you want. So at the core, that's who I am. That's my mission. So I am a teacher of the Word of God. So that's part of my work. But I also then have had the grace of being exposed to the work of teaching in the area of leadership development. So I do a lot of training, a lot of teaching in leadership, and maybe for the past 5 years-ish, maybe even more than 5 years, I've also then done a lot of work in the area of enterprise development. So teaching people how to set up enterprises and all of that kind of work. So yeah, I think at the core, that's what I would say. In terms of background, I'm a Val boy, right? As you know, so I come from Foyani. I was born in Sebokeng, in Zone 11.
Okay.
And when I was 2 years old, I think, my parents then moved us to Foyani, and we then have been living in Foyani since 1990, what, 1992.
Okay.
So since 92, we've been in Foyani, and yeah, it's just been a very interesting journey. So I started my schooling at Little Flower. I don't even think anybody would remember what Little Flower is.
Is that a preschool?
It used to be a preschool.
Okay.
Where currently where there's the Val Show grounds.
Okay.
Right, in Foyani. So there was a preschool there called Little Flower. So myself and my sister were there, and then what's interesting is when my sister, who is 4 years older than me, right, when she was moved to Selborne Primary School to go and do her grade 1, then I also then forced my parents at the time to say, no, I'm not going to stay here. I want to move. So I went to Selborne a year earlier.
Okay.
Right? So as opposed to starting school at 7, I started at 6.
At 6.
So again, I finished school at 17 as opposed to the normal 18. So that's interesting, and it's also important because I think because I started school earlier, it also made me to struggle a bit in school, right? So both academically and socially. Because being 1 year, although I mean, education psychologists teach us that the most important period of development is between 0, so when you are still in the stomach, to 8, right? Okay. Yeah, that's the most important period for your education. So in my case, for an example, I still struggle with spelling. And partly it's because of that, right? Because that created an education barrier of some sort.
That early start.
Yeah, that early start, because I struggled, then catching up was a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, in any event, I then went to Selborne. And again, not this Selborne, right? The old one. So that was. And I'm not taking anything away from anyone. But yeah, we really had a great time at Selborne Primary. It was a brilliant primary school at the time. And equally so, when I moved from Selborne, I went to General Smuts High, and that was equally brilliant. Another thing that some people may know, but people that know me now may not know, I was a very, very prominent athlete, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I was very prominent from grade 1 right up to matric. I had some athletic success.
Okay.
At some point, I had the honor of actually participating at nationals and getting a 3rd position. So I was holding number 1 at that time in cross country. And as indicated, we went to George in the Western Cape, and I got a 3rd position. So that was, I got quite a lot of success as a result of that. So that's something that, as I'm indicating, people that know me from much earlier would know that, but people that just know me from business and stuff might not know that. Then after Smuts, I moved to VUT.
Okay.
With an intention of doing a course in engineering. But because my marks were not qualifying for going directly into the course, I started with it was a bridging course. I think it was called an intro.
Okay.
An intro into engineering. So I did the intro, and at some point during the intro period, I at VUT, this was. At some point, I decided that no, this won't work for me.
Right? Okay, what field was it then?
Electric. So the intention was to go into electrical.
Electrical.
Yeah, light current.
Okay.
So yeah, but eventually my position was this won't work. At the same period, I got an opportunity to go and work at Transnet.
Okay.
So I started working very early. At the age of 21, I started working at Transnet Right Rail, and I worked at Transnet for 4 years. And yeah, that was a very foundational period. Obviously, because you're working whilst you're quite young,
Yeah.
it means you have to learn quite a lot of stuff. And because I don't have an older brother, I've got an older sister. That also helped in just balancing certain things out, right?
Okay.
So yeah, I started working at Transnet from 2011 until January of 2015, and this is then the formative period of my entrepreneurial journey. So from 2014 late. I'll share a bit more about the story when I get the opportunity. But yeah, from 2014 late, I then had some inklings to go into business. And at some point, I just decided, because I was young, I didn't have responsibilities per se. It was easy for me to make a decision to leave Transnet and go into forming something.
Let's go into that. So when do you realize that Paul is a teacher? Like when does that realization come?
Yeah, I'm with you. So
That's self-awareness.
the self-awareness. I think what happened with me, and I think I was fortunate, right? So maybe you'll notice that I'm thinking quite a lot as I'm even talking, because this process has just been a self-reflection kind of process. It's been a good one. But yeah, I think in 2009, right, I started getting an opportunity to be taught on certain important things. I'm a Christian, so on certain Christian fundamentals, right?
Okay.
And among the most important fundamentals I was taught on at the time is the importance of prayer and fasting.
Okay.
And that practically became foundational for literally everything that would come in my life beyond that period. So, as indicated, through the process of prayer, I got to understand asking important questions about myself, important questions about my past and about my future. And I think all of that just gave me structure and direction, the kind of which you wouldn't even get from your parents, right? Because again, this is something that I do say in some of the programs, which is true, that even your parents don't know who you are, and they can't know who you are, right? Because when they wanted a child, they didn't want you.
Okay, explain that a bit. When they wanted a child.
Oh, it's just practically logic, right? Your parents didn't ask for you, or if they prayed for a child. If you were born as a result of an act of action, they were not even intending to have a child in the first place.
Okay.
So you are here not as a result of what they wanted. You are here because you were given that opportunity for life by God. So the fundamental questions about your life will not originate from your parents. And that's also equally true when you look at people that place such a huge emphasis, right, on your lineage. And that's still quite limited in terms of what it can give you, except the genes, because the truth is, nobody knows you. So even psychologists tell us that there are things that you know about yourself that nobody knows. There are things that other people know about you that you don't know.
Yes.
And there are things that you and other people know, right, about you. But there's a last category, which is equally important, which is things that you and other people don't know about you. And that's reserved for that divinity, right? So at the core of who Paul is, what Paul is supposed to do, is information that is not available to people. And yeah, I think I'm not preaching. I'm followed, but I am giving you truthfully my life philosophy.
Okay.
At the core, many of the fundamental questions about who I am, what's my mission, and how should I do my mission are things that I got within prayer. And that really has been a huge foundational lesson. So in that period, to answer your question, that's basically what I got about myself, and that then just gave me the direction.
Okay. So in 2009, going through that process, did you know that you ultimately wanted to go into business? Or because I mean I'm thinking now, if you identify yourself as a teacher, I mean you could have become you could have become that in many different ways.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to find out
The link.
you know, how does that, you know, how do you say I'm gonna do this?
Yes, in this form.
Yes.
So this is a true two-pronged kind of approach, right?
Okay.
So maybe let me take you back to a very interesting and again foundational period of my life. In 2007, I finished grade 12, went to VUT for a year, no, for 2 years actually. And then in 2009, this is what happened as I just indicated.
Yes.
But at the same time, something interesting happened, right? Which sometimes, dark periods have a silver lining, right?
Okay.
And sometimes we miss that, especially if we are not people that are quite, what's the correct word? Reflective is the right word, right? So what happened is, in that period between 2009 and 2011, so for that 2 years, I didn't have a job, right?
Okay.
So I was at home, and again, that was foundational because that's also equally the same period that I transitioned into the journey that I just mentioned earlier. So I knew I wanted to go into business in that period, right?
Okay.
And my thinking around that, I remember one day, because I come from the Valley, I took a taxi to Joburg, and I went to, I took another taxi to Rotherport. There's a street in Rotherport called Ondega.
Okay.
You would know it. It's the longest street in Rotherport, right? And my thinking along that time was that I want to open a car wash, right?
Okay.
So I don't remember how I ended up with thinking about Ondega Street, right? But literally, I just went there with the intention to find a good spot where I could set up a car wash. Where I was going to get the money to set it up is another topic, right? I don't even think I know where I was going to get it.
Okay.
But I did know that I wanted to do that, right? And I remember another time I went to Gold Reef City, the theme park.
Okay.
And my intention at that time was, because I had gone to Gold Reef City and I noticed that it was so difficult to just get around Gold Reef City. You just get tired from the walk, right? So my thinking was, you know what, because I was playing golf at the time, again, because I wanted to go into business, right? So it's a good networking platform, allegedly. So I had this thing of setting up golf carts in Gold Reef City, right?
Okay.
And I mean, I was young. I don't know what I was thinking. But essentially, when I got a job, right, I always already had that sense that this is like a temporary thing, right? This is a stepping stone. So part of what then allowed me to make my decision. So between October of 2014 and January of 2015, I had to make the decision to leave Transnet, which was a big decision, right?
Okay.
And how I made this decision was engaging through a process of thought, right?
Okay.
And again, because I'm Christian, a process of engagement with God pertaining to my future, right? And my thinking firstly was, because I'm not the kind of person who will be happy with a salary, right? I'm not a 9 to 5, right? At some point, I will be discontented then, because at some point, I do have this impulsive kind of behavior. So I didn't want to get married because I wanted to get married at the age of 25, right?
Okay.
So I didn't want to get married and then tell my wife, who now knows me as someone who works at Transnet with a salary. Then I say, now I'm tired of everything. I want to go into business.
Yeah.
So when I made the decision, I was thinking about that, right?
Okay.
I didn't want instability. And as a result, I also moved my target for getting married from 25 to at least 30.
Okay.
With the thinking that I would need 5 years to establish a business, and at that point I'd be comfortable to take care of a family.
Okay. Would you say that the decision to leave Transnet was impulsive in a sense that it's something that you thought of over a short period of time, or
No, I wouldn't. I think I gave myself a good 4 months.
Okay.
And again, because I was young, like I was 25 years old, I didn't have a child, I didn't have a house to pay. I only had a car, which I was comfortable for the bank to repossess in the event business didn't go well. As a matter of fact, I went through that process, right,
Okay.
of scenario planning. So in the process of scenario planning, I remember I wrote down what's the worst thing that could happen. And my deduction was really the worst thing that could happen to me was just getting the car repossessed. And that's something I was willing to lose. And I thought, what's the worst thing that could happen if I don't leave? And my deduction on what the worst thing could be if I didn't leave was literally horrible. I couldn't bear with it. So it was easy to make that. That was a seamless decision in that sense. And again, I think maybe let me go to your earlier question. Why training as opposed to something else? Like you say, I could have been a teacher, right, at a school and all of that. I went through the process of thinking because I was exposed at the time in October of 2014 to the senior management at Transnet. So you have to understand, Transnet is a 66,000 employee organization. I mean, at the time. So being exposed, I was literally in the grass fields, right? I was literally at the bottom of the organization. And one day I was they had symposiums on Thursday, right? Because I was in the train crew, I was not normally in the symposium, but at some point I got the opportunity to then attend the symposium, and there was a lady from head office. So I don't remember what she asked, and I answered the question, and after that she asked to speak to me, right?
Okay.
And little did I know that that would open such a huge opportunity for me. So maybe some people would recall there's a time where there was what they call the market demand strategy, the MDS, right?
Okay.
It was a 7-year Transnet strategy of turning the company around, right? And government borrowed Transnet 1 billion to do that and all of that stuff. So they needed change agents for the market demand strategy. And seemingly in that conversation, this lady had then earmarked me as someone that could be able to fit that particular role. Right?
Okay.
But I didn't know this. So I remember I was back at home and I got a call. I was actually jogging, right? So I got a call and I answered the call. I didn't know who was calling, only to find it was this lady. So she says to me, look, tomorrow be at OR Tambo. And yeah, she then gives me some details. So only to find that I would then be, this is directly that, right? This is like an aha moment of sorts, right? I would then be given an opportunity in that time to facilitate a high level strategic planning session for the business unit, the steel cement business unit, which I was part of, right? Okay. So that introduced me to the world of consulting, the world of strategy, which I didn't know anything about.
And you're still at the bottom.
I'm still at the bottom. Bottom. So this was like maybe for them, right, as managers, it was just like, let's get people to get exposed, people from the bottom, people that are in operations, to just get exposed to what's happening behind the scenes.
Okay.
But for me as a young man, that literally was life changing.
It opened your eyes.
It opened my eyes to a big question, which my question was, how can I move? Because I wasn't comfortable to be at the bottom. I wanted to wear suits and to look good, right? So I wanted to be at a higher position in Transnet, right?
Okay.
Truthfully, I actually asked God the question, can you make me CEO of Transnet? And interesting enough, right? The answer that I came to was, yes, I can be CEO of Transnet, but how much would it cost me? And literally, it would have cost me the rest of my life just to get that, right?
Okay.
So was it worth it? My answer was no. Then the question was, what's then the alternative? Then I had to go through a strategy, right, of thinking about this, right? So how I went through this was, what do I want from being CEO of Transnet, right? And I then wrote down, I want the prominence, I want the influence, I want the decision-making capacity, right? I want the wealth. And then the question was, is being CEO of Transnet the only thing that you can do to be able to get to that particular um, 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 prominence and wealth and this and that? And the answer was obviously no. Then the question was, what's the other thing that you could do? And that's how I then got to the conclusion that as a result of my exposure, right, I was there in the same room, right, where decision making was made. But I noticed that as a facilitator, as a strategist, right, you can influence, right, the room, the organization to take a certain direction, and you'll still make a chunk of money, you'll still have the prominence and all of that. At that time, I was deeply steeped in reading books from John Maxwell. So I think my line of thinking was also then stemming from that I mean, Maxwell is highly prominent, he's meeting with presidents and all of this stuff. So why can't you do that? So that's how I stumbled into training. And again, because I had already had a sense, because I was already doing teaching, that I can do that in a different capacity. So that's it. That's how I
you
do
do
it.
it. Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. You do training in leadership
Yeah.
and entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And I want us to go into that.
Okay.
Okay. What is entrepreneurship? I mean, I know it's a basic question, but I think it's important that we understand this. And I think someone who does this training, you could maybe give us some understanding in this regard.
I can attempt. So I think my observation, right, is that entrepreneurship at the core is resourcefulness, is agency, right? The ability to use your human potential, right, to solve the problems that we have. I think at the core, some people stumble into big business just because there was something that was needed and they were resourceful enough to either make it happen or to get it. And people become suppliers because they know where they can get the product. So I think at the core, it's a mindset of agency, right? A mindset of resourcefulness, right? And then obviously then there's other elements that go alongside that. But in principle, for me, that's how I would see it.
To celebrate the launch of Let's Check In with Foyani, we are hosting a business partnership competition where participants can win 50% stake in a new business. The prize includes over 100 square meters of genuine leather, which is worth more than 50,000 rands, an industrial sewing machine, and tools. What we need from you is to send us a 1 to 2 minutes video telling us what makes you the perfect partner, what will you do with the material if you win, and number 3, how much time do you plan to commit to the venture? Now, you can send us your video to competitions@letscheckinwithfoyani.co.za, or you can WhatsApp us on 068 287 0279. Alternatively, you can tag us on all our social media platforms using hashtag Let's Check In Competition. Remember, this competition is for those who are 18 years and older, and they must be South African. Terms and conditions can be viewed on www.letscheckinwithfoyani.co.za. I hope you are the next partner.
Can anyone become an entrepreneur? And I asked this question because I shared that when I did my first memory of wanting to go into business.
Yeah.
When I shared this vision or idea, the person I spoke to didn't think I was cut to can be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So and that begs the question: is it some good? Is there specific individuals that are cut for this, or anyone can go into entrepreneurship?
So I think the short answer to that is yes, anyone can be an entrepreneur, right?
Okay.
Can anybody make a business successful? The short answer to that again is yes, right? Again, what does it require? It requires an individual to just be resourceful. And can you develop resourcefulness? Can you develop agency? Without any doubt. So I think, and this is again at the core of the understanding, right, of the American society, right, especially at its foundational level, right, is exactly that, right? That's why you've got that home of the brave, right, and all of that. That the entrepreneurial spirit is something that anybody can harness. It just requires courage. It requires you to see, right? To open your eyes and see what's actually happening. So that's the opportunities and all of that. And then to harness the strength to organize, right? And I mean, I don't want to go too deep into this because I teach leadership, right?
Yeah.
I would think from, for an example, a lens of one of the biggest foundational management theorists, leadership and management theorists, which is Henry Fayol. So Henry Fayol has these 5 areas of management, right?
Okay.
And at the core, if you look at those 5 areas of management, it's essentially just about human development. It's essentially about you being able, for an example, organizing, right? Anybody can organize, right? It just requires you to develop the discipline. And that's why when people go through these training programs and all that, just teach on entrepreneurship, you notice that things such as discipline, right, are core because without that discipline, it's impossible to make any enterprise to be successful. So, can anybody develop the discipline? Yes, if you want to.
So I hear you. For a South African young person, who is at home not doing anything, what can they do to go into entrepreneurship? What is it that where should they start?
Yeah, that's a bit more dynamic a question because firstly, if you're talking about a young South African that wants to go into business, into entrepreneurship, my question would be: is there an ecosystem that is available for them? Is there a platform? Is there a space? Is there an environment that is conducive for that? And my argument would be for a young Black South African, um, I would argue that there isn't necessarily quite a lot available, right?
Okay.
However, there is a lot available if you are thinking in the right way. So, to answer you directly, I would say if you are young and you want to go into business, develop yourself, think in the right way, right? Because what happens is mostly we have people that have a mindset, and this is really quite nationwide, right? Particularly for us as Black people, I think maybe let me speak and narrow it down to us as Black people. We've got a mindset that essentially is. Let me go back to a statement by President Thabo Mbeki. I think it was 2003 Nelson Mandela lecture. He was giving the lecture, right? And he says that among the sad things that happened, so he says that Black people don't necessarily have a model of success, right? He says that what we then did as Black people is to model white success, right? And white success basically looked like living in Santon and driving a Mercedes Benz, right? If you've got that, then you've made it. But the challenge with that, and you see it, I mean, across the spectrum, right? The challenge is for us as Black people, driving a Mercedes and living in Santon is just a very narrow scope, right, of what success would look like because we've got legacy and generational issues that require a certain kind of mindset, right? So a paradigm shift is the right word. And indeed, I would say that as a young person, the right place to start is inside because there's multiple opportunities outside, but they require a certain kind of mindset. They require a certain kind of character. So develop the character, develop the mindset, and you'll spot the opportunities. You'll be able to organize sufficiently to be able to get the funding if needs be, right? Some of them don't need funding, right? They just need you to organize properly. So, but without the mindset, which is the area in which we are lacking, we won't be able to make things happen. So, again, still on the issue of mindset, you see it again with tenderpreneur kind of mindset, right? Okay. Where entrepreneurs don't think about building businesses, they just think about making a quick buck. Yeah. And there's a difference. There's a difference between winning a tender, making a quick buck, and building a business. So, like in my case, my interest is much more building a business, right? If I get opportunities that enable me to build easier, faster, because of the capital injection that comes from that, that's what I'm pursuing. But my thinking is not like if I can just drive that, live there, because that's limited. Then when I get it, then what? What's the purpose, right? Mm-hmm. So my thinking is if we have more philosophy business, I think the book Vositembewara talks about this quite well, right? Okay. If we can have more philosophy businesses, and philosophy businesses require us to think deep about what is our problem, who are we? You know that whole thing with China, right? That China closed the country for 30 years, right? And asked themselves very critical and fundamental questions. What is China? Where is China? Who is Chinese? What does it mean to be Chinese? And all of that. Today, we are shocked that the Chinese are overtaking or have already overtaken the Americans in the West. But there's nothing shocking to them because they know that they did the hard labor of going back and figuring out who China is. And today they're leading from a 5,000 year legacy of Chinese philosophy, Chinese thought, and practices on building businesses. So it's not a surprise, for an example, that the oldest company in the world is Japanese, right? Okay. It's because of that Kaizen kind of mentality, right? That we're not just doing it for now. This is generational, it's legacy. So if we can embark more on that, right? But to be able to get to that, you need to be able to have people in leadership that are thinking that way. You need to be able to have the ecosystem. You need to be able to have the entrepreneurs that are not just thinking about a quick Mercedes Benz. Yeah. It's cheap and it's survival mentality. That's survival mentality, right? In our context, if I can just live in Enfuleni Golf Estate, but that's limited. And then you live in Enfuleni Golf Estate, then what? Most definitely. So we don't want that. We want legacy, right? And that's why, again, this is still contextual. You find a very rich Afrikaner who drives a Hilux and wears high-tech shoes. And this is a different kind of mentality. So in my thinking, if we can be able to develop that kind of ecosystem and that kind of thought processing, as I said earlier, these kind of platforms are giving us the opportunity to think different, right? To probe each other in terms of our thinking. But why do you want to buy a Louis Vuitton shoe? Why? Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe it's nice if it connects to something much deeper in you, right? But just don't do it because Foyani is doing it and because someone else is doing it. We need much more legacy kind of thinking.
You know, one thing that interests me, earlier you mentioned that as Black people, we modeled success through looking at the white person. Yeah. How did we get to, according to you, how did we get to a point where we thinking Louis Vuitton and whatever luxury brand that we want to wear? Because white people don't do that.
Look, that's an interesting one. I think it comes from you spoke about it earlier, it comes from the early generation of tenderpreneurs, right? Because remember that the early generation, I think I don't remember who it was that I was listening to who spoke about this, right? He says that the early generation of entrepreneurs in South Africa, this was an American, he says the early generation of entrepreneurs in South Africa, right, were going out of the location and going to town, right? And he says that what's interesting is that because of being prominent in the location, right? And this is also the reason why, truthfully, why some people are not willing to help others, because you still want to go back and be land.
Yeah.
Well, it happens, and it's true, right? And people are buying people Hennessy's, but they don't give them opportunities, right? I'm rhyming now. But in essence, the idea here was because of that prominence, right? The ability to be more affluent, right? And now, because you are living in certain spaces, you are now shopping in certain spaces. And this then becomes our model. So the first generation model, the white people, right? And they then got the opportunities. But then the second generation, which me and you, I guess, are now third generation of Black entrepreneurs, we are now modeling those that came before us. And they are shopping in Santon at the Diamond Walk and all of that. You get my point? So that's where the Louis Vuitton kind of lifestyle comes from, because we see I'm a hot man, they are wearing Gucci's and they are driving beautiful cars and all, and that then becomes a model, right? Again, unfortunately, that model is also associated quite strongly with quick fix, right, kind of thing, right? Because again, remember, this is true about us as South Africans in general. We're quite consumer mindset. So if you go again and look at the difference between us and Chinese produce, right? And they don't consume quite a lot of what they produce, right? Whereas with us, we consume and we don't produce anything. We don't. So that comfort to go out and buy something, a cap for 10,000, it comes from that because we think as consumers, right? We're not thinking what 10,000 can actually do because we don't think like producers. So again, at the core, it's mindset. At the core is mindset. If you take it further, mindset comes from philosophy. So if I ask the question, what's the philosophy that you're using to go into business? Let me give you an example. In my case, my philosophy is I have to teach. This is my philosophy.
Okay.
So it means if I can be able to build a strong organization with 100,000 teachers that go all over the world to teach, I'm doing my purpose better, right?
Yes.
I'm a John Maxwell of my time.
Yes.
But even if I'll be the only one that does it, right? And I can't organize sufficiently, and I can't raise capital, and I can't expand to the nations of the world, at least I'll still be doing what I need to be doing. So if your philosophy is not strong enough to go into business, then it will show, right? With now you've got excess money, you don't know what to do with the money because you didn't have a philosophy. You didn't know why you are building what you are building. In some cases, you are not even building. You're just trying to escape poverty. So most of our entrepreneurs and enterprises are essentially poverty escaping routes, as opposed to legacy building.
Would you say that's the reason why we're also failing to scale businesses? I mean, because there's a lot of us who start, but then we fail to scale. You know, we better to grow our business.
Yeah. There's in business what they call, not in business, in leadership, there's what they call the law of the picture. And the law of the picture practically says people do what people see, right? So the law of the picture is, in essence, in some root cause, the reason why we can't scale, because we don't see. There's nothing that we see that.
There's nothing to emulate.
There's nothing to emulate, exactly. So if there was, I mean, for an example, if you think about it from an Afrikaner perspective, right? If I'm growing up as a young Afrikaner boy, my dad is taking me along the lines to see that 10 hectare, 100-hectare farm, right? So for me, I would never settle in that small house. Are you with me? Because I'm thinking 100 hectares. So I'm thinking big workshop. So because for us, we don't have that. We don't have the picture. then it becomes difficult for us to be able to package ourselves in such a way that we won't be complacent, right? Because what you're talking about, part of the reason why we don't scale is because we become complacent, right? I'm driving a BMW and I'm living in Three Rivers East, right? My case, yeah. So you don't want to have a kind of situation where you are so limited. We don't travel. So because we don't travel, we've not seen what other nations are doing, what other people are doing. Again, it was Vosita Mbegwayo who said, and I don't listen to Vosita Mbegwayo. It's for selling me. So I used to.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Look, it's not wrong. It's not wrong on this decision.
No, I've got my reasons why I'm saying what I'm saying.
Okay.
So he says he was comfortable. He was, the most expensive speaker in the country.
Okay.
But he says when he started to travel to the US, right, and get exposed to your Jay Shetty's and all of these guys, he saw how they are living and how much money they are making, right? And it expanded his thought. So again, it's the law of the picture. So my take would be we need pioneers. We need people that will be comfortable to be nobodies, that own huge, that are able to build big, right? That can be able to expose us to bigger, more, right? And the problem is there are people that are doing big, but unfortunately, they don't give room for others. So they don't open the door for others to come and see. And because of that, then we don't have that replication of great successes.
You're pioneering yourself. One of your aims is to train 100,000 individuals by 2030.
Yeah, and I think my take is we want to move a bit beyond that. I think we've been exposed in the past year to a bit more, a bit bigger. Again, what I'm saying, right? Because we've seen a bit bigger, we notice that I can't say this because I don't speak like that, right? But I was somewhere and my goal was something that a person has already done in just 1 year, right? And that expands your thinking. Why do I want to do this in 5 years? If someone can do it in 1 year. Yes, the ecosystem is different, the platform is different, they come from a different country, so it's different, but at least it expands your thinking. So I'm big on Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey was quite foundational in my thinking about a lot of things.
Okay.
Equally so with John Maxwell. And many other philosophers. I'm very big on that. What's interesting with Stephen Covey, he says something. He says that he's talking about imagination, right? You can't think what you haven't seen. So you must see, then you can think, right? So thinking precedes sight. Practically, that's why 80% of our energy as human beings is spent just on the eyes, right? So literally, our eyes, our sight, right, is what's so critical. So in essence, I think if we can be able to see more, right, it will then allow us to have bigger desires, greater desires. It will expand our exposure. So I think that's at the core, and that's what I want now. I think the more I'm seeing, I don't want to tell you my new target. I'm still but I do have a much bigger target now.
My question to you is, for someone listening right now, and myself sitting here, how do we help you achieve this?
So I think at the core,
because I think it's a beautiful goal. I love that it's a big and important. We need to train people. We need to help people become better. And I'm just thinking, how do I contribute to that? Someone who is listening, how do they contribute to that?
I think maybe let me put it this way. This is what we all need to do for each other, particularly as Black entrepreneurs, right? Access to market. So the best way for anybody to help me is to say, Paul, there's a procurement manager somewhere. there's an HR manager somewhere, we can expose you to them and they can give you business. And that's without giving each other business or access to market, right? We practically can't do much for each other. So you know someone that can be able to open a certain door. Maybe you are the person that can open the door for us, right? And say, look, here's this industry, go into it. They are willing to fund. Remember, we've got ESD, right? Enterprise and Supply Development. So, I mean, just that is the space where quite a lot of training is taking place in industry. So that's what we need. We need access to market. And equally so, not even just my business. I mean, again, this is what we need to do for each other.
Yes,
Yeah.
most definitely. Most definitely.
Yeah.
I think this was a very good session, but I want you to give us your last word.
Okay. Okay.
I just want you to say one or two things that maybe we might have missed in this session that we did not talk about. And I know, I mean, with these sessions, we can't cover everything.
Yeah, cover everything.
You know, but we'll see. I hope if people want to see or hear more of these, they will, you know, send us messages. And say, But I just want to give an opportunity to say one or two things that maybe we might have missed in this session.
You know, my brother, the wisest man that lived is King Solomon, right?
Okay.
And King Solomon achieved some brilliant feats as a result of wisdom. My last word to yourself and your audience is embark on the journey of getting more wisdom. I think that's what I need for myself. I think as Black people in South Africa, that's what we need. I think as Africans, that's what we need. We need more wisdom. And wisdom is such a deep rooted thing that with it you become indestructible, right? And I'm thinking that even our businesses will become indestructible as a result just of pursuing wisdom. So it is true. It is the principal thing. And my encouragement for us as Black entrepreneurs in particular is let's get more wisdom. Let's share more wisdom. Let's love wisdom. Let's engage more in wisdom. Let's practice the teachings of wisdom. There's a statement, maybe this would be my last thing rather. There's an interesting book. It's called The Prince. Some people might know it. It's by Niccolo Machiavelli. So The Prince is a very infamous book, right? It's quite interesting that I'm quoting it here. But there's a commentary that I listened to on The Prince. So not the book itself, but a commentary.
Okay, right? On the book, yes.
And there's something that Machiavelli says in his preface, right? He says he would come back home and sit with the men of old, right? I'll explain it. He will come back home and sit with the men of old, right?
Okay.
And ask them questions to try to figure out why they did what they did, right? And what was the end result of those things. So what he means is he would come back home and read, right? The life lessons of Alexander the Great and all of the men of stature and men of influence of his day, right? Marcus Aurelius, all of these people. And he says that he would probe them. So in his own thinking, right, he would probe them, but why did you decide to go into Sicily, right, as opposed to going into Greece? Why did you decide to advance as opposed to retreat? All of those. So all of this framed his mindset both about leadership and military strategy. And it literally made him to become the most influential leadership thinker of the ages, practically, right? And I'm saying that let's do the very same thing, right? Of probing, right? Of deep and introspective thought, looking into what happened with them, right? These are questions we've not asked. I think it's R1 billion, if not R2 billion economy that has been stolen from us, right? Because we haven't asked the question. And that's why indeed asking questions is more important, and that is a function of wisdom. So let us just become more wise. And as we do, we will be able to build better, build more sustainably, build higher walls, right? That can be able to endure the test of time. So that's my take, my brother. That's my take.
Brother Paul, continue to shape Africa.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate
Thank you so
it.
much. So thank you for the platform, and thank you to your audience for giving us an ear.
Thank you for honoring us with this.
Thank you, Dad.